and welcome to Indus News. Live from Islamabad, I'm NILE and these are the headlines. In occupied Jammu and Kashmir, Indian troops have killed 3 more Kashmiris in a military raid in Shopian. Hundreds of Kashmiris have been killed ever since India stripped the region of its autonomy in August 2019 and imposed a curfew. In Pakistan, the Corps Commanders Conference has reaffirmed solidarity with Kashmiris in their struggle for the right to self-determination. Chaired by the Army Chief General Qamar Javed Bajwa at the GHQ, the meeting expressed satisfaction over positive developments in the Afghan peace process. According to the military's media wing, a detailed discussion was held on the situation along the line of control and internal security. Pakistan's Prime Minister Imran Khan has called for coronavirus vaccines to be considered a public good. Addressing the 10th virtual D8 summit, Khan said vaccine manufacturers must speed up production or share technology with developing countries. He also called for an end to export restrictions of vaccines. Globally, the virus has claimed nearly 2.9 million lives and has infected over 132 million others. The U.S. has imposed fresh sanctions on a state-owned GEMS enterprise in Myanmar. The move is the latest from the U.S., targeting the generals who seized power in the February 1st coup and have killed more than 600 anti-coup protesters. Twelve people have been found beheaded following an ISIS attack in the northern town of Palma. Police suspected that those who were killed were foreigners. The attack comes as regional leaders were due to conclude a meeting to consider a response to the insurgency in the country. For more news in detail, stay tuned. We'll be right back after a short break. Welcome back. In occupied Jammu and Kashmir, Indian troops have killed 3 more Kashmiris in a military raid in Shopian. Hundreds of Kashmiris have been killed ever since India stripped the region of its autonomy in August 2019 and imposed a curfew. Hundreds of politicians and activists have been languishing in Indian jails since then. New Delhi has been facing growing criticism from the international community for its human rights abuses in the occupied valley. Amnesty International, in its annual report, slammed India's clampdown on civil liberties in Kashmir. It denounced extrajudicial killings of Kashmiris at the hands of Indian forces. In Pakistan, the Corps Commanders Conference has reaffirmed solidarity with the Kashmiris in their struggle for the right to self-determination. Chaired by the Army Chief General Qamar Javed Bajwa at the GHQ, the meeting expressed satisfaction over developments in the Afghan peace process. The military's media wing said a detailed discussion was held on the situation along the line of control, internal security, and the third wave of COVID-19. The forum reaffirmed the armed forces' resolve to extend full support to the civil administration in controlling the pandemic. It also expressed confidence in the Army's operational preparedness during the recently held formation exercises. The United States says it is ready to remove sanctions on Iran to resume compliance with the 2015 nuclear deal. At a news briefing, a State Department spokesperson said Washington is prepared to take the steps necessary to return to the JCPOA. Ned Price said the removed sanctions will also include those inconsistent with a joint comprehensive plan of action. He added that the talks will be difficult because of the indirect formation, a history of mistrust, and a complexity of the issues. Iran has not yet commented on this recent announcement by Washington. Meanwhile, diplomats from major powers met separately with Iran and the U.S. officials to discuss the deal. The U.S. has agreed to withdraw all remaining combat forces from Iraq. The two sides, however, did not specify a timeline for the withdrawal. Following a virtual strategic dialogue, the two countries issued a joint statement. A video conference was led by U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken and Iraqi Foreign Minister Fuad Hussein. They agreed that the Iraqi forces are ready to take on more responsibility. The statement read that the focus of the U.S. coalition forces in Iraq is now in training and advisory tasks. It said this reflects the continued efforts against ISIS are bearing fruit. Myanmar's UK ambassador says military attaché has occupied London embassy and barred him from access. This comes after a month of the envoy called on the military to release deposed leader Aung San Suu Kyi. Yemen coalition says it has destroyed an explosive laden drone launched by Houthi rebels. In a statement, the coalition said the drone was aimed at the Saudi city of Khamis Mushahid. The coalition said attempts by the Houthis to target civilian-populated areas constituted war crimes. It said coalition forces are taking operational measures to protect civilians in line with the international humanitarian law. Hostilities between Houthis and the Arab-led coalition have increased recently. This is the second such assault by the rebels in less than 24 hours. Syria says at least 4 of its soldiers have been injured in Israeli airstrikes in the southern parts of its capital, Damascus. The state media said the strikes caused material damage. It said some of the missiles were fired by Israeli warplanes flying over neighboring Lebanon. The media said the Syrian air defenses intercepted the missiles and downed most of them. Meanwhile, Hezbollah said one of the Syrian air defense missiles exploded near the Lebanon-Syria border. Israel's airstrikes in Syria have increased in recent weeks on alleged Iranian targets. President Joe Biden has affirmed U.S. support for a two-state solution to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. The White House says Biden made these remarks in a phone call to Jordan's King Abdullah bin al-Hussein. In a statement, the White House said the two leaders discussed the strong bilateral ties between the U.S. and Jordan. It said both agreed to strengthen cooperation on multiple political, economic, and security issues. It added Biden also underscored the importance of King Abdullah's leadership to the U.S. and the region. Meanwhile, the King's office said Biden expressed full solidarity with Jordan and its efforts to safeguard stability. In Sudan, the death toll from tribal clashes in the West Darfur's Guyana state has risen to 132. Local officials say at least 208 people have also been injured. A state of emergency has been declared in the state to mitigate the ongoing violence. Last year, Sudan's transnational government signed a peace agreement with some of the rebel groups that had fought ousted President Omar al-Bashir. But the attacks by member states of the Arab tribes have escalated, leading to clashes in the heavily armed region. In Mozambique, 12 people have been found beheaded following an ISIS attack in the northern town of Palma. Police suspect those killed were foreigners. The attack comes as regional leaders were due to conclude a meeting to consider a response to the insurgency in the country. ISIS-linked insurgents have been active in the region since 2017. The government says dozens have died in the latest assault that began on the 24th of March. Aid groups believe tens of thousands have been displaced, but the full scale of the casualties and displacement remains unclear. Egyptian President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi has warned of the risk of conflict over Ethiopia's giant Nile Dam on the Blue Nile. El-Sisi's remarks came after talks involving Egypt, Ethiopia, and Sudan to end Nile Dam dispute collapsed. In televised remarks, el-Sisi said all options are open to Egypt to deal with the crisis if Nile water supply is disrupted. He noted that Egypt continues to coordinate with Sudan and the world. The Egyptian president said Cairo will not allow the development of African countries at the cost of its own water rights. Earlier, Sudan also said the issue of Renaissance Dam affects its national security and has regional repercussions. Another round of talks to resolve Somalia's election deadlock has ended without a deal in Mogadishu. Somali Information Minister Osman Dube blamed leaders of Puntland and Jubaland regional governments for the failure. In a press conference, Dube said President Mohamed Farmajo agreed to engage in the Leadership Consultative Summit, but he said these regional leaders are not willing to hold polls based on the September and the February agreements. However, the opposition blamed the government for the stalemate, saying it is creating frustration to extend its mandate. The latest round of talks was organized by the international community after Somali leaders failed to reach a consensus. Russian President Vladimir Putin has accused Kiev of provocative action in eastern Ukraine. He made these remarks during a phone call with German Chancellor Angela Merkel. The Kremlin says both sides have voiced concerns about the situation in eastern Ukraine. This comes as Ukraine President Volodymyr Zelensky is traveling to the eastern front line after a surge in clashes with separatist forces. Fighting between the Ukrainian army and separatists has intensified in recent weeks, raising fears of a major escalation. Earlier, NATO members, including U.S., Canada, and the U.K., reaffirmed support for Ukraine's sovereignty. In Northern Ireland, the power-sharing government has called for a calm following a night of violent riots over post-Brexit trade barriers. During several hours of violence, police officers were attacked, petrol bombs were thrown, and a bus was burnt. 8 officers were injured in a scuffle between loyalist and nationalist areas in Belfast. The violence has been brought on by a combination of factors. Northern Ireland politics and bigger events like Brexit are in play, but there is no single straightforward reason. It's now time for a short break. Stay with us. Welcome back. India has again recorded the highest daily surge in COVID-19 cases with 126,000 infections overnight. With 685 fatalities, the country has also witnessed the second most daily deaths this year. Globally, the virus has claimed more than 2.8 million lives and infected over 132 million others. More in this report.
The spread of dangerous new coronavirus variants and glitches in immunization has the world at sixes and sevens as it battles the pandemic. The U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention say the UK-linked strain is now most common in the U.S. The Pan-American Health Organization has declared South America the most worrying region for COVID-19. Mexico and Brazil have decided not to limit the use of AstraZeneca's vaccine, even after Britain and the WHO recommended not using it for people under 30. Brazil has recorded more than 3,800 coronavirus deaths overnight, pushing the toll over 340,000. Despite the country running out of graveyards, Brazil's President Jair Bolsonaro has insisted on no national lockdown.
We are not going to accept this policy of staying at home, of closing everything down. This virus will not go. This virus, like others, is here to stay and will remain for a lifetime. It is practically impossible to eradicate it. What are we going to do until then?
In England, a study shows that the prevalence of infections dropped steeply in March. However, it is once again picking up pace. Meanwhile, in Brussels, the European Union's health ministers have failed to agree on common guidance on the use of Oxford jab. Belgium and Spain have limited the use of the vaccine to people above 55 and 60 after a report on blood clots.
Based on the available information as of today, and as a precautionary principle, it is recommended to use AstraZeneca's vaccine in people aged 60 years and older. I proposed it to the interterritorial meeting and it has been approved by a large majority. So the vaccination strategy will now pivot in relation to the AstraZeneca vaccine, which will be inoculated in people over 60 years of age.
New Zealand has suspended entry for all travelers from India, following a high number of positive cases arriving from the South Asian country.
In Pakistan, 98 people have died from COVID-19 in the past 24 hours, pushing the country's death toll to 15,124. The health ministry reported over 5,300 new infections overnight. Currently, the number of confirmed cases has topped 705,000, with over 623,000 recoveries. Pakistan's positivity ratio stands at 10.69%. Nearly 50,000 tested were conducted in the past 24 hours across the country. Pakistan's Prime Minister Imran Khan has called for coronavirus vaccines to be considered a public good. Addressing the 10th virtual D8 summit, Khan said vaccine manufacturers must speed up production or share technology with developing countries. The Prime Minister also called for an end to restrictions on the export of vaccines. He said concrete measures should be adopted to expand inter-D8 trade from around $100 billion to $500 billion by 2030. He added that the D8 should develop a strategy to promote cultural, educational, scientific, and business exchange. 50 British parliamentarians have questioned UK's Prime Minister Boris Johnson over putting Pakistan on the travel red list. In the letter, the PMs have asked for an urgent reply with evidence to show why the travel restriction was imposed on Pakistan. The letter was written by parliamentarian Yasmin Qureshi, the chair of the All Parties Parliamentary Group on Pakistan. It was signed and ratified by parliamentarians from both Labour and Conservative groups. The letter says London's measure has a huge impact on the citizens of UK, as the country has over 1.1 million British Pakistani residents. The MPs in the letter have asked Johnson to share a date for the review of the travel list. Pope Francis has urged the world's financial chiefs to reduce the debt of poor countries. The pontiff said this in a letter to the participants of the IMF and World Bank's annual meeting. He said the global pandemic deepened the socioeconomic, ecological, and political crisis. The Pope called for a new global plan that gives less developed nations a share in decision-making and access to the international market. Earlier, G20 leaders extended a suspension of debt servicing costs for developing countries, but fell short of canceling debt. South Korea and the United States have formally signed a defense cost-sharing deal. The Special Measures Agreement settles a long-running dispute that strained relations between Seoul and Washington. Korea's Vice Foreign Minister Cho Jong-kook and U.S. Embassy's Chargé d'Affaires Rob Rapson attended the signing ceremony in Seoul. The deal increases Seoul's contribution by 13.9% to the cost of hosting some 28,500 U.S. troops for 2021. South Korea's contribution now stands at $1.05 billion. This comes as the biggest annual rise in nearly 2 decades after Washington called for greater funding. American troops are stationed in South Korea as a deterrent to Pyongyang. The U.S. has handed over the first F-35 fighter jets to Denmark in a ceremony at Lockheed Martin's factory in Texas. 27 warplanes will replace Denmark's Air Force aging F-16 fighter aircraft. Denmark's Defense Minister Trine Bramsen termed the addition a great milestone and a new era for the Danish military. Defense General Chief Flemming Lenterfeld said that the high-tech jets met the requirements for the future's complicated battlefields. The aircraft will now be flown to Luke Base in the U.S., where Danish pilots will be trained. The first F-35 fighter jets will arrive in Denmark in 2023. In the U.S., prosecution witnesses continue to fault the actions of a former police officer, Derek Chauvin, in the fatal arrest of George Floyd. At the trial, an expert testified that no force should have been used after Floyd was handcuffed. Los Angeles Police Sergeant Jody Sitker said Chauvin disregarded his training when he kneeled on Floyd's neck. Talking to jurors, Sitker said a police officer's use of force has to be proportional during a fluid situation. Sitker testified Chauvin's act constituted deadly force as Floyd was not actively resisting.
Because at the time of the restraint period, Mr. Floyd was not resisting. He was in the prone position. He was handcuffed. He was not attempting to evade. He was not attempting to resist, and the pressure that was being caused by the body weight could cause positional asphyxia, which could cause death.
A Dutch cargo ship abandoned at sea during a storm off the coast of Norway has been attached to 2 large tugboats. Local officials say the ship is no longer at risk of running aground. The Emsliv Hendrika started rolling dangerously after parts of its cargo shifted in the rough weather. This led to fears that it would spill some or all of its 350 tons of heavy oil and 50 tons of diesel in its tanks. The Norwegian Coastal Administration lowered a crew into the vessel from a helicopter as part of the salvage operation. The NCA said the ship has been rescued and will now be towed to Ålesund. India's cricketing legend Sachin Tendulkar has been released from the hospital a week after he contracted COVID-19. Tendulkar was previously quarantining at home following his positive test. The former Indian captain took to Twitter and thanked all of his well-wishers. He retired from professional cricket in 2013 after notching 100 international centuries in a prolific 24-year career. Tendulkar lives in Mumbai, the capital of the Maharashtra state, which has been the hardest hit by a surge of infections. Chaos erupted as Miss Sri Lanka 2021 after the winner was crowned, decrowned, and then crowned again. More in this report.
Contestant number 20.
Clutching a bouquet and wearing a sash that read Mrs. Sri Lanka, newly crowned beauty pageant winner Pushpika De Silva blew kisses and waved to the crowd as she glided across the stage. But on the cusp of a moment, the event was plunged into chaos as Carolyn Jury, who won the pageant in 2019 and the Mrs. World competition in 2020, interrupted the celebrations to brand the winner a divorcee. De Silva, who needed hospital treatment after the incident at Sunday's gala, was named Mrs. Sri Lanka again at a smaller ceremony. At a news conference, she said she planned to launch legal action against her alleged attacker.
In the U.S. state of California, families are enjoying a new walk-through candy-themed experience called Sugar Rush. The park in Los Angeles features giant lollipops, cupcakes, and other items of candy. Details in this report.
Californians have been provided with a vibrant outdoor delight after months of restrictions due to the pandemic. The park, created with 350 gallons of paint on a 50,000 square foot parking lot, was meant to be a drive-through experience. But as lockdown curbs eased, plans changed to allow visitors to linger up close with its oversized unicorns, giraffes, and kangaroos.
It's actually good to be outside, so I actually love it. We've been in quarantine for a long period of time, so this is actually a good thing for family members to come out.
In order to comply with the health and safety guidelines, visitors are only allowed to walk forward and not backwards. There is also a no candy rule to prevent people from taking their mask off. Instead, candy is handed out to them as they leave. Although the park seems to be aimed firmly at children, organizers say the experience is for everyone.
You know, it's easy to put a smile on a kid's face, colors, shiny things, but really we want mom, dad, brother, sister that are a little older to come here and really enjoy and think this was something different, and that it was curated not just for the little ones but also for them, and they might pick up on some of those items that are here.
Visitors can explore the park's mirrored corridors and interact with colorfully costumed cast members. Sugar Rush is expected to run until 2nd of May.
A German museum has earned a Guinness World Record for the longest melody played by a model train. More in this report.
This German model train has broken a world record for creating the longest melody with 2,840 wine glasses. The train performed a compilation of 20 classical pieces over a 690-foot-long track. Frederick Braun and his team at the Miniature Wonderland Museum built the model, while the museum remains shut during the lockdown.
And what sounded like a crazy idea, where everyone first said, "You must be crazy," now we are going to go along and try to break a world record. Because that would be a world record, and that just brings fun to all of us, honestly. We're playing kids.
Setting up the course, which passes intricate miniature landscapes and tiny, colorful versions of cities like Hamburg and Las Vegas, posed significant challenges. The team also had to make sure that the mallets attached to the model train did not shatter any of the wine glasses.
It's not all perfect, but just try to play Verdi with wine glasses, or even worse, the Bolero, if you only have 2 octaves at your disposal. And that's why I say, this world record is a mega world record. It won't be beaten anytime soon, I'm certain of that.
This is not the first time that the museum has made it into the Guinness World Records. It also boasts the world's largest model train set with a total track length of 15,715 meters.
It's now time for a short break. Stay with us. Welcome back. In London's Royal Academy of Music, pianist Yun-Fan Yang performs pieces by Chopin, Liszt, and Haydn in an empty hall with just a cameraman. The 24-year-old hopes to win over Leeds International Piano Competition's jury that will see his performance by video. More in this report.
Held every 3 years, the Leeds has had to change its processes due to the COVID-19 pandemic with no live jury or audience watching. With travel restrictions in place, the Leeds invited some 60 competitors from around the world to its first virtual round this week. They performed their roughly 25-minute recitals under the same conditions, playing on a Steinway Model D grand piano and with identical camera setups.
I thought it might be a bit challenging at first, but once I started playing, I just forgot about everything. It was just literally just me and the music, which was great, and the cameras weren't interfering me at all.
First held in 1963, the Leeds is a prestigious music competition offering a career-making package of prizes for its winner. The Leeds art director says the competition will keep aspects of this year's event in the future, but will welcome live audiences.
Don't get me wrong, we won't get rid of the live element, and hopefully we would be able to do this in this way, but with live audiences. That is going to be what our next step, so that actually we can bring the Leeds to such a broad church of communities across the world.
The second round, semi-final and final will probably be held in Leeds in September. While the first round is virtual, organizers hope the later stages will have a live audience.
A 9-year-old kickboxer, currently the main breadwinner of his family, hopes to make his family rich after becoming a professional fighter. Details in this report.
Tata is eager to get back in the ring after coronavirus curse brought his fight season to a halt. He is 9 years old and the money he has earned from fighting is vital income for his family. Tata's last fight helped his mother pay off her debts, who sells roadside snacks.
When COVID-19 hit the first time, it was bad for our family. But I know the second wave will be worse because it happened when things were just about to go smoothly. When COVID-19 came the first time around, our family still managed to survive by using our savings from what Tata had earned. This time we have no money left and no customers buying my food. But I'll continue fighting and will wait for COVID-19 to disappear, even if I know this will take a long time.
Child fights in Thailand take place at tournaments, festivals and temple fairs and can be as popular as that of adults. But some medical experts are calling for a ban on minors boxing. They say it could cause stunted growth, long-term neurological problems, brain damage and disability.
การชกมวยมันจะมีการกระทบกระเทือนสมองในผู้ใหญ่เนี่ย
Boxing causes brain injuries, as we can see clearly from old boxers. Boxers are at risk of memory loss, losing the ability to control their muscles, Parkinson's disease and myasthenia gravis. The level of symptoms depends on how much damage has been done. Some people might say it isn't a 100% guarantee, but based on studies, the percentage of risk is very high and it will lead to disabilities.
As per Thailand's Professional Boxing Association, there are estimated 300,000 boxers in the country under 15. Some Thai lawmakers have sought to ban boxing under the age of 12, but a draft bill failed to reach Parliament and would likely have faced resistance due to its popularity and revenue.
The Wall Street stocks have opened higher amid a strong rally in major technology shares. Nasdaq Composite traded nearly 1% up following a hike in the shares of Apple, Microsoft, and Amazon. The S&P 500 traded 0.25% higher, but the DJI index was down fractionally. However, the claims for unemployment has reached over 700,000 despite signs of healing in the job market. Meanwhile, the oil prices dropped after the U.S. gasoline inventories unexpectedly surged. In Pakistan, 8-year-old Fatma Naseem has broken the world record for most full elbow contact strikes in a minute. She hit the target with 272 elbow strikes in 60 seconds. Fatma registered the same record with 242 elbow strikes when she was 7 years old. But later on, Indian athlete Kiran Yunal took over with 258 strikes. Fatma is the daughter of Pakistani martial artist expert Mohammad Rashid Naseem, who holds more than 30 Guinness World Records. In football, Paris Saint-Germain beat the reigning champions Bayern Munich 3-2 in a thrilling first leg of their Champions League quarter-final. Kylian Mbappe scored a brace to hand Bayern their first defeat in the competition in over 2 years. Mbappe took just 3 minutes to make his mark, followed by Marquinhos doubling the lead for Paris. Eric Maxim, Choupo-Moting and Thomas Müller canceled out a 2-goal lead. However, Mbappe had the final say as he netted the winner for his side in the 68th minute. Meanwhile, Chelsea secured a commanding 2-0 away win over FC Porto in the opening leg of their Final 8 contest. Mason Mount and Ben Chilwell netted 1 each for the Blues. In the National Basketball Association, Devin Booker and Chris Paul have steered Phoenix Suns into a 117-113 win over the visiting Utah Jazz. The victory comes as 7th straight for the Suns. Booker scored 35 points for the host, followed by Chris Paul's 29 with 9 assists. Donovan Mitchell pulled off a stellar show for the NBA-leading Jazz with 41 points, but failed to avert their defeat. Meanwhile, 7 Brooklyn players scored in double figures as the Nets dominated New Orleans Pelicans 139-111. Kyrie Irving led Brooklyn with 24 points, while LaMarcus Aldridge added 22 for the hosts. In other matches, the Houston Rockets beat Dallas Mavericks 102-93 to end their 5-game losing streak, while Boston Celtics edged New York Knicks 101-99. It's now time to take a look at the weather around the world. For the latest news updates, you can follow us on our social media at Indus.news.